Welcome to 4Culture, exploring the richness of culture in our community through arts, heritage, preservation, and public art.
My name is Vaughn Raymond, and I'm a Seattle filmmaker. For the past few years, I've been working with a lot of local communities on a series of films to commemorate the centennial of the Chittenden Locks and the Lake Washington Ship Canal. Now, the locks are practically synonymous with Ballard, and of course that means Seattle's Nordic community, which has played a huge role in all of the maritime trades and traditions that are so important to the history of the canal and the city. To tell this story, I went to the Nordic Heritage Museum in Ballard, where I got a wonderful tour of their collections that relate to the locks and the canal, including many items from their vaults that are not usually on display. By the way, since I filmed this documentary, the museum has been in the process of moving to a brand new location right on the Ballard waterfront. Join us as we explore one of the really rich local cultures that lie at the heart of our historic ship canal.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Hey, good morning, Gordon. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to be here at the museum. I was hoping we could take a look at some of the stuff or the exhibits and collection relating to the centennial of the ship canal.
Absolutely.
That's coming up.
Why don't we start down here through the Dream? Yeah. You know, it's going to be really timely with the new museum being down on Market Street.
Oh yeah, I can hardly wait. The locks and ship canal are basically the waterfront of Ballard when you think about it. So this centennial is going to be hugely important and celebrated, I'm sure, by all of us, because it's an integral part of the community here.
Well, you know, so many families that came to Ballard, coming from the old world, the Nordic countries, really came here for a fresh start.
Absolutely, and you can tell just from these pictures here, and this is true of my own family, how they came from water environments in the old country. They were related to this fishing and boat building, and that's why they came here.
When the locks was first opened in July 4th, 1917, the community felt a real sense of ownership because the sheer economic driver that was the locks being built put people to work and also supported these immigrants and their families. And so I think part of the history behind the locks is the development of Ballard as a Nordic community. One of the great things I like about this display is that you can see some of the personal stories here as reflected in the trunks that people brought with them. In 1890, about one of every 4 immigrants to the state was from one of the Nordic countries. And by 1910, about 8% of the city was actually from one of the 5 Nordic countries: Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, Finland, or Norway. I think one of the great strengths of our collection is that we have personal items, not only trunks, but things that people brought with them from the old country, things they used in their professions, including professions that were here in Ballard, such as the shingle mills, the boat builders, working in the timber trades, and also in the Ballard locks, as many were employed for that project. I think it's an important aspect that the Scandinavian countries, for the most part, are bordered or surrounded by water, and that the immigrants that came here brought with them traditions and skills that specifically had to do with maritime trade and industry. Well, this is another great part of the exhibit in the Dream of America, the immigrant story about how a lot of the immigrants that came to the Midwest, they just didn't like it because there wasn't a maritime environment here.
Correct. That was my grandfather.
And the weather as well. They didn't like that, and so they came out to the Pacific Northwest. A lot of them did. This is a great historical image showing the Ballard Boat Works here. In the foreground, you can see an example of traditional Nordic boat design, wood construction, and very clean lines.
And this is actually, I think, right along where the route of the ship canal would be.
Yeah, I believe you're right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In the background here, you can kind of see one of the typical vessels that was used in the lumber and the fishing trade, bringing milled lumber, shingles that were milled in Ballard, as well as different types of fish harvesting like halibut and cod and salmon.
You think that looks like a dory that they're building in there?
Yeah. I think this might be one of like a typical dory style that the larger vessels would carry. They'd carry sometimes 8 or 10 of them at a time. The fishing schooner would be kind of like a mothership, and they would send the dories out and for the guys to do that.
Yeah, that was very dangerous life.
Yeah.
There's another photograph that I really like, and this is a shot of the Ballard Bridge.
Oh, this is a great image.
Yeah, and that was one of the 4 bridges that was built as a consequence of the ship canal going through. And it's a drawbridge. It was built with these wood supports, and those of course were dangerous for fire because of the mills along the waterfront there, so they had to keep an eye on those. It was totally rebuilt in the 1940s to remove that danger.
Well, Gordon, would you like to head into the fishing gallery?
That's a good idea, yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about your family's history here in Ballard. And
yes, be glad to.
This is a great image.
That is.
Looks like these guys are just getting ready to put their dory down and do a little halibut fishing maybe.
I live in Ballard, have most of my life. I'm the son and grandson of fishermen, halibut fishermen specifically, Norwegian Americans. And when I think about it, my whole family, uncles, cousins, they were either crew on fishing boats, or they were captains and owned a fishing boat, or they worked in some of the supply stores down at Fisherman's Terminal. Yeah, these are photographs that are, of course, near and dear to my heart. They were given by my family. This is the opening of Fisherman's Terminal on January 10th, 1914. My grandfather was very involved as a member of a group of local fishermen who lobbied the Port of Seattle to create a terminal for the Seattle fishing fleet, because the talk was at the time that had that not happened, this fleet would have gone elsewhere, to Everett or somewhere else on Puget Sound. And so on that opening day, they had a parade of 200 boats. And my grandfather's boat, the Inga, was the lead boat. It led this parade. This was a huge event to the fishermen. Fisherman's Terminal was benefited by the building of the locks, which permitted the raising of the level of Salmon Bay. And of course, then all of a sudden it became freshwater. It had been saltwater, subject to the tides. That was now a secure spot for the fishing fleet. So because of the construction of the locks and the Fisherman's Terminal, they were able to stay in the Seattle area and have for 100 years. Fisherman's Terminal is still a thriving center of activity for the Northwest fishing fleet. I like to take my grandchildren down there because you can relate to them some stories of the past, because they're still doing the same things that they did in the 1940s and 50s. You see the fishermen out there repairing their nets. I can remember seeing that as a little kid myself. And this is a picture that illustrates what it was like before the locks. This is at the foot of 28th Avenue Northwest, which is, of course, where the new museum is going to be. But you're looking across to Magnolia. This is the entrance to Salmon Bay from Shill Shoal, and this is low tide. And you can see the people walking way out in the middle there at low tide. But that was my grandfather, where he worked on his nets. My father was a halibut fisherman too, and here's some of those great schooners and longliners that were built here in Ballard, often to specifications from Scandinavia. Some of these boats are still around now.
Here's another one of the boats that we have in the collection, a halibut fishing dory. This one dates to about the 1930s. And this is kind of typical of the craft that were sent out from the larger ships, several at a time. Usually worked with a crew of 2 or 3 men to put down lines, fishing for cod and halibut. Well, you know, another occupation that so many Swedes and Finns and Norwegians in the Northwest were involved in was obviously the lumber industry, working the forests.
Even in my family, a lot of the fishermen were in off-season would work in the mills in Ballard, the shingle mills and the lumber mills.
One of the great things about this display is it talks about how important the shingle mill industry was to Ballard, and as a result, also the Ballard locks, since a lot of that material came through the locks.
Came through. And it was called the shingle capital of the world for a while.
Here you can see a good number of laborers here working. Probably most of these were Scandinavian descent, I would think. Well, Gordon, how would you like to see some of the behind-the-scenes collection items in our archives?
Oh, that would be great. I really would like that.
Good. Here we have some of our historical photographs that relate to the Ballard locks.
Oh, that's a great photograph. That guy is really emblematic of a fisherman.
Yeah.
Is that photographed here in Ballard, you think?
Yeah, right off Salmon Bay. And this is another great image showing these guys and their day's catch. And this guy's sitting down. He looks pretty tired, probably working all day.
Well, there was a reason why my dad didn't want us to go out fishing.
You know, this is a great piece related to the when the locks was finished.
Yeah.
See my second largest locks. The Uncle Sam figure, you know, representing the fact it was a federal project. Here's a picnic that was of a school group in the Ballard locks.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
And I believe this was taken during the excavation part. This little boy here, he's not looking real happy, but...
That's a great photograph, too.
Yeah. Knowing your family's ties to the fishing industry here locally, I thought I'd pull a few fishing-related objects. So here we've got, this is a heavy-duty fisherman's work boot. Seen a lot of use, obviously.
Yeah, well, heavy-duty is right.
Heavy-duty, made for all kinds of inclement weather and, you know, working on decks with heavy equipment. We saw a hat similar to this one in that photograph, oilskin hat. It's designed, you know, very, very much for the Pacific Northwest and working out on the water.
They would fish in any kind of weather, I know that.
Yeah, well, it was kind of, you didn't fish, you didn't eat.
You didn't, that's exactly right. Oh yeah, and here's the model of the new museum.
All right.
Wonderful location, right on the ship canal. I think this is a great future for the museum. In 2017, we're going to be, hopefully, construction started, and that's the anniversary of the ship canal. So it's a tremendous step forward.
In 2017, the Nordic Heritage Museum will be moving down to the water on Market Street, right next to the locks. We're expected to open in early 2018.
We're approaching the site.
I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the museum to connect with the community in some different ways. It's so great that it's located right on the water, making that tie to the maritime community. When I walk along the bay, I'm reminded of my own childhood here in the Northwest with my father, who was a sailor.
And there you have the foot of 28th, and we've seen a lot of pictures today from that historic shots of that same location. That's kind of cool, isn't it?
It's really nice to see how even today, you know, you see lots of ships out here. A lot of them use the locks when they head up to Alaska to do their fishing. It's a real sense of identity and a tie to the land and to the sea. And I think that's true for a lot of Nordic people and also other people who are non-Nordic that live here and enjoy the community and benefit from this great place that we call the Pacific Northwest.